Welcome to Reefing Radio, your go-to salty station for reef aquarium talk, tips and interviews. Let's dive in.
Hello, welcome to episode 2 of Reefing Radio. My name is Chris and I'm once again joined by my two co-hosts.
Hi, James here.
Still Gareth, still here.
Episode 2, welcome back. Thanks to everyone who's listened to episode 1 and followed us on social media. We've had some really nice feedback. We did have some audio issues last time, which hopefully will be resolved in this episode. So definitely my mic was very crackly. Hopefully that should be fixed now. Just a reminder that we do have the giveaways still going. So I think as people are finding us, the number of suggestions and feedback and stuff on the first post has been, there's a few comments and suggestions, but I'd like a few more. So we'll probably keep rolling this over for a few more episodes before we do the giveaway. And I'll remind you how to enter that at the end of the episode. I guess we could just jump in. How are we doing? How's everyone's tanks?
Yeah, hot, eh? It's been a hot week this week.
Mine seems to be holding temperature. As last time round, I'm really happy actually with how it's holding temperature. But I've done absolutely nothing really this week, reefing wise. It's been quite hands off. I added a couple of Vergi and nudibranch, well, 3 of them actually. I don't know if they've survived or not. There's a whole acclimatization sort of method that you have to go through to give them the highest chance of success, and ultimately it results in them hiding in the rocks and then hoping that you see the aptasia reduce over the coming weeks and months. So hopefully that was successful. I added a couple of flower nems as well, some of those little Vietnamese pretty ones. Found one with the Rasta zoas, with Rasta Zoa coloration. It's really nice. And one with this super green mouth and white frilly edge, which looks really nice as well under white.
I've got a few of those and had them quite a long time now. I thought they might breed the crucifer are the bigger ones. I think they breed quite easily. I've never seen these ones breed. Yeah, they're nice. They're not as colourful as the Caribbean ones, but I think they're still really nice, and they don't get as big as well, so they're better for smaller tanks. And I actually also added some nudies, I think, from the same person, but I didn't really do much to... Maybe I should have read the document more carefully. I just kind of dunked them in, and I've seen some eggs in there, and they've eliminated already. I put them in the sump area of the all-in-one, because that's where my aptasia were, and they actually seem to have disappeared. My idea was that they'll breed hopefully in there, and then the babies will transition to the tank. I do have a peppermint in there that I need to remove because I think they eat them, so I should probably do
I added a peppermint and haven't seen it since I put it in, so I'm wondering whether the hogfish has gone and had a very big expensive breakfast. Yeah, hopefully the nudibranch won't go the same way. I was told that they're really good hiders, so if you can get them into the rock work at night when wrasse or hogfish or any of the predators are likely to be about. We'll see. I'll report back in a few weeks. Have my eggs reduced in number, or are they still going absolutely crazy?
How about you, Gareth? Any new developments?
Yeah, I've been I've had something I've never had before, which is I've gone 3 weeks without a water change. I'm Mr. Regular normally, so every week, Monday, do my water test, do my water change. But yeah, life has been busy, so 3 weeks without a water change is making me wonder whether I should be doing it a bit more often, but I don't know how you keep the routine then. I like the Monday routine, never forget, never miss, whereas if I do it every 2 weeks, we forget which week you're on. So anyway, but things are looking good. Need to test, which again, that's not a phrase I ever say, I need to test, I always test. Which, speaking of which, I've got a trident this week as well. That's exciting.
You're really expanding your Neptune apex.
Exactly, it's kind of come on a bit quicker than I expected, but it was one of those offers too good to refuse. It's again secondhand. I like my secondhand kit. Yeah, just waiting some dosing tubes to arrive to service it. So it just needs a bit of. It's been sat in there's little pinch points inside the dose. It's quite clever. It's got one dosing head that draws from 5 or 6 lines. It works by pinching lines. But where it's pinched the tube and then compressed it. That's my next thing. And then what was the other thing I've done? Oh yeah, I've made myself a moonlight string of LEDs to go off the apex. So I think as of tonight, once I've stuck in some code in, I should be able to run a moon simulator on my tank, which would be cool.
When you say are they just regular?
Yeah. So like you do it at Delvin, it's the Apex. They sell them for like 60 quid a string, 5 LEDs. Apparently, people have cracked open these little boxes they're in. It's literally just an LED soldered to the wire. I've made one for what, like 5 quid, 10 quid at the most. Yeah, surprisingly easy, and like it works. I just need to program in the basically I'm trying to get it to follow our moon pattern rather than I think it's set up to do somewhere in like Indo region, something like that.
Why are you doing that, Gareth? Why do you care about the moonlight?
The moonlight. Who doesn't care about the moonlight? So the aim of the game is to not necessarily breed corals, but increase my chances of spawning corals. I'm following the local moon cycle because the room it's in's got a big skylight above it. So I'm expecting when it's a natural open night, it can be quite bright in that room. So if I follow the natural local, it shouldn't interrupt. But at the same time, it's in my living room. There'll be times when the lights go on when they shouldn't do and all that stuff. So increasing my chances. Next thing to do is stick on the heaters on a cycle again, a summer-winter cycle. So going up to 25.5, going down to 24 degrees in the winter, which hopefully will help with tank heating and energy saving and all good things like that as well. So that's been my little project this week.
Yeah, that'd be cool if you can get a few occasional spawns. What have I been up to? So yeah, I also added, as I said, some nudibranchs to do with some Aiptasia in my lagoon tank. I was really intrigued by these AquaWiz alkalinity testers that are suddenly popping up everywhere. So I think they've been quite popular in Asia for a long time because they're already on Gen 4 now, and they're cool because they don't require any reagents, and calibrating them is super easy. So you just do a Salifert test or a HANA test and you enter that number that you get into the device, and that's it. So far it seems to be working really, really well. So it tests every hour, and I kind of thought, like, why not? It's not using any reagent, it's not that noisy. I heard it at first, but now I don't even notice it going. So, but I've only been running it I think 2 weeks, so it's still early days. But yes, seems pretty cool, and it's been interesting to see where I guess that's the other thing that I've kind of been focusing on, is trying to get rid of these dinos in the SPS tank behind me. And you can see James was just saying before we started, it looks clearer,
much clearer. Yeah,
so definitely improvements. So I put a bigger UV on the side of the tank. So I previously had a little in-tank one, and I don't think that was really cutting it. So now I've got a big one on the side of the tank and a pump running the water in and out. And yeah, that seems to massively improve things. And almost immediately the corals looked happier. Color is coming back to some of the acros. I'm sort of seeing growth tips again. So I'm really hoping that tank is back on track.
Fingers crossed. I'm thinking of changing my salt. And I've got a salt that's like mixes really nice. Actually, I like how it mixes. Parameters are always pretty consistent, but they're quite low. And because I'm not doing a whole heap of dosing, I wonder whether it'd be better off to find a salt that mixes at slightly higher levels.
What are you using at the moment?
I'm using the Fauna Marin salt. So it was brilliant when dosing my free part, and I was able to dial in levels. I'm now dosing a little bit of all for reef, but it's mixing at sort of 7, for the KH. So it doesn't take much for a little bit of alkalinity uptake, whatever it might be, coralline or some growth, or maybe some of the stony corals, and it comes
down. So it's clams.
Yeah,
it's the massive clam.
It could be the massive clam as well. So I think maybe I'll switch out. I've always used fairly low parameter mixing salt, but I think I'm gonna, when this bucket's done, mix it out for something that mixes a little bit higher.
What are you tempted by?
I'm not sure, actually. Does anyone else have any recommendations? I'm easily persuaded.
So I was exactly the same as you. I used to always use Tropic Marin, Tropic Marin, the Pro Reef, and that also mixes low. So I had some batches of 6.5 or something, and I know that is natural seawater level. It was, as you say, it's a bit low. So I went for Niles. Everything else is the same, but the alkalinity is like 8.5, 9 maybe is the highest. It just seems like every other salt I've used, but the parameters are a bit, as you said, a bit higher. So that's why I've been using probably now about a year, maybe year and a half, something like that. And it's been fine. It mixes very clean, mixes very quickly, stores fine. I make a month's worth at a time. So that would be my recommendation. It's about the same price as Tropic Marin, unfortunately, but I think Fauna Marin's quite expensive as
Yeah,
well,
I don't
isn't it?
know. They've got some good deals on. I mean, I'm not supposed to plug anything. I don't know. Are we allowed to plug things, Chris?
We don't have any sponsors, so we could say whatever we want until we are sponsored by Red Sea, and we have to say the Red Sea is the best. We can say what we want. But they used to give away. Do they still do the free ICPs? That tempted me.
Yeah, the free ICP, like it's about 70. I think I paid £75, something like that, for a 20 kilo bucket, but with a free ICP. So you're really talking sort of what, 50 quid, something like that, 55 quid for the salt with the cost of the ICP added in. It's really really good value, I think. And as I say, if I was dosing more, or I was doing my water changes religiously, as I should. This last month or so, a little bit like Gareth, life's been really busy, and you miss 2 or 3 weeks of water changes, and you don't adjust your dosing or what have you, and then all of a sudden you think, oh blimey, everything's looking quite low. So we'll see. I like the sound of the Nios. Maybe I'll give that a whirl next time round.
Yeah, I liked it. What do you use, Gareth?
Yeah, I'm Chopric Marine, like Pro Reef, and I've used that pretty much since, like I was talking about in the last episode, having issues with my 2-part crystallizing. I pretty much just changed everything at that point. I use Fauna Marine 2-part, boiling light, but the boiling tight version, the buy your own and mix in their trace. So I do wonder whether I should change over to their salt, but Chopric Marine's just been there and steady, and I don't really know how do you tell that a salt is good? Do you know what I mean? Like, it's white, you mix it in, it goes clear. Like, I get that you get a brown residue if it's rubbish, but other than that, like, how do you know it's different? My corals look happier. It's probably because you've just done a water change, isn't it? Like,
don't start this again, Gareth. I mean? It was 6 months last time we went down this rabbit hole. Do you remember?
Yeah, well.
But I do, and although it's not easily quantifiable, I do think that there's something in buying good quality, in inverted commas, salt of a certain level. Like, I've seen issues in tanks, and one of the common denominators has always been on buying a cheap salt. I'm sort of compromising, and look, that might just be a reflection of how that person's keeping their tank. If they're compromising on salt, maybe they're compromising elsewhere, and
could be a correlation.
Yeah, it could be a correlation, but I don't know. You did move from a cheap salt, didn't you, Gareth, to a good salt, and your fortunes did improve, your success improved as a...
Yeah, I think it's one of those problems, there, isn't it? Like, you always say in reefing, you should just change one thing and wait 3, 4, 5, 6 weeks to see the effect, but you never do you? I changed, like I said, the entire dosing system, the salt system, everything I did made for a better tank, but pulling apart the separate bits. But I think it's like you said, James, like, the grade of the ingredients you're using, like, yeah, they're all using the same chemicals, but like, what grade of chemical? Like, is it food based? Is it lab based? It is the same stuff. It's just the other bits that come with it, isn't it? So yeah, hard to pull apart as an individual.
It's just like reefing, isn't it? They're not very transparent, the way that these products are sold, whether it's equipment or whether it's additives. You don't really. I understand why. There's intellectual property, and it does make it difficult as a consumer to make a decision on something other than price.
I've tried a few of the cheaper brands, and I also went for a phase of like thinking there's got to be a reasonably priced option out there, because they've all gone quite high now in price. And on Ultimate Reef published this article, I tried to get all the most popular brands together, work out if you mix it up 35 ppt and this is how much it is per kilogram and stuff, like what actually works out the cheapest and things. So like, I still didn't really come to a solution. I've ended up, as I said, I just went for Nios, which is one of the most expensive ones, but I did try some of the cheaper ones and like immediately saw some weird things on ICP. And I think that, I don't know even whether it's down to like the ingredients they're using. I think it's like the consistency from batch to batch that varies wildly, and the stratification of things like that in the bucket. So I don't know. I tried to go cheaper. As soon as something went wrong in the tank, I was like, is it because of the salt? So I just went back to like something that I know, and That's
so
where I
best
am now.
chance of, because this is a Reefing Success podcast, isn't it? Right?
Yeah, so maybe we should say, today's episode is going to focus on reefing success, which is a very sort of broad, open-ended topic, and I guess that's kind of the idea. So Gareth suggested this, and I think that's because we were quite negative in the last episode, talking about all the things that have gone wrong in our previous tanks, and I mean, I think that just reflects reality and how difficult reef keeping can be. But at the same time, we've all had lots of success as well, and I agreed with Gareth. I thought it would be a nice idea to talk about success today. So yeah, maybe this is a good segue to this topic. So maybe I don't know where you want to start, but maybe salt. Yeah, so yeah, how important do you think salt is for reefing success then? After that discussion we've just had.
Do you know, in my heart of hearts, I really think, depending on what you're doing, you could use any salt and have success. I don't think it determines your success, does it? But it's just like James saying, it's just so unclear what everyone's doing with it. But yeah, for me, I always think there's bigger picture stuff than the salt. If that's the level you're working at, the salt's the thing that's causing me to succeed or not. I think there's much bigger parameters, there's much bigger factors that affect success. Yeah, that's my
you say
view on
that,
it.
but like it's fundamentally, I think James said this in the previous episode, like we're keeping water, aren't we, at the end of the day? So I feel like if you're starting with, let's say bad quality RO water and a lower quality salt, I mean, you're setting yourself up to fail, right? I don't know. That's kind of my take on it, maybe. I mean, I get what you're saying, like but fundamentally it's the water at the end of the day that's the most important thing. So
if somebody came to me and said, James, I've never kept marine fish before, what would you advise me to do? Should I buy RO in or should I make it myself? I'd always say make it yourself, and if they said, what salt should I go for? Should I go for this unnamed stuff that I found on Amazon, or should I buy a reputable brand that, people have used and had success with? I'd say buy the reputable brand and go with the salt where people have had success with. It's just like narrowing your options. There's so much complexity, isn't there, and things that we don't even understand about the hobby and what we do. We say we're keeping water, we don't really understand what's in it. It's like just try and strip out all of the risk, or as much risk as you possibly can.
Yeah.
And I think to some degree that's about control. So like making your own RO, it gives you an element of control over it. I'm not suggesting that not TDS out of your own RO machine versus not TDS out of, what do they call it, the spotless water machine is necessarily any more or less risk. But at least if something does go wrong, you're the one in control of it. You can change your DI, you can change your filters, and when it was last done. So you know that note reading is as accurate as it possibly can be, where you can't if those decisions and that control's taken out of your hands. And I think ditto with the salt. Those brands, you'd hope that those brands that are charging more, have better quality control going into their product, and therefore more consistency. So, I think that's just a good place to start.
So I was thinking about that in terms of, especially what you're saying, James, like, you need to make your own RO and things like that. To me, that's like moving on through the success. You can have success at the beginning. Like, what are we starting with? Are we talking about people having success with their first tank, success like with their reefing journey? Like for me, for that first tank, all you need to do is keep things alive until you're hooked. Do you know what I mean? And that is success, isn't it? So you put in some traditional, you put in some softies. So let's say some Zoas, a toadstool, pair of clowns. To me, like that is success, isn't it? You get your salt in there, you get your RO in there, even if it's from like the fish shop. As long as those things survive, that's success, isn't it? And then you can build it up. Otherwise, does the hobby not become a bit inaccessible, or like money? Well, it is fundamentally limited by money, isn't it? Like how much money you've got. But are we saying like the barrier to entry then is like money? Because your first tank, you need to have an RO machine, you need to have top brand salt, you need to have, let's go with the lights, we're going to have Radions. Do you know what I mean? We're talking about an entry level tank that's, you could probably rack up $2,000 quite comfortably. And is that still success? I don't know. You look on Facebook, how many like 1-2-year-old tanks with all that stuff is there?
I think that for me, the definition of success is how happy the reefer is ultimately. And that's something very, very personal. We do talk about the hobby being super expensive. Is it more expensive than any other hobby? Hobbies are just expensive, aren't they? You play golf, you've got to take an expensive membership out every single year that you get charged for. You buy expensive clubs. Maybe you want to play guitar and you've got 10, $2,000 guitars by the end of it. It's expensive to entertain yourself these days. You can do it cheaper by all means. And it's not a cheap hobby. It's not something that can be done for nothing. It's going to cost you some money. But I don't know. I think, as you say, Gareth, that actually it's about your expectation and about your happiness. If you're happy growing some Zoas and you can do that without an RO machine or without buying an expensive salt, and that's brilliant, isn't it? It's really successful because you're enjoying the challenge, being inspired maybe to do more, giving you the bug, all of those good things. So I don't think you can attach success to owning a piece of equipment or only growing certain types of corals or
because that's the thing, isn't it? Like, to be successful reef keeping, you have to have a packed out SPS tank. Like, that is success. But that's one of those, it's often banded around, isn't it? Like, not only do we say, well, we're in this kind of like niche hobby of people who keep saltwater fish and corals, there's another niche of the SPS above that. There's definitely little niches within the hobby to get stuck into, isn't there?
But I think that's about enjoying the challenge, right? So I think it's rubbish if you say to be a successful reefer, you've got to have a, pain tanks stuffed full of big Acropora colonies. Of course you don't. That's nonsense. But actually, if you set your a challenge to have Chris, a 40-litre cube full of Acropora and you succeed, then that's really successful, isn't it? So in the same way that it is if it's a softy tank or LPS tank or, an MPS tank, whatever it may be, and enjoying the challenge is part of success.
On that point of kind of the idea of tanks packed out with coral, I sometimes get a little bit frustrated with like that side of the hobby. And obviously I think it's been exacerbated by social media, but the kind of the idea of these tanks that are completely full of super colorful coral and they've got one of every type, and that the idea that that's successful kind of annoys me a bit, because I used to be a biologist and I've always been very interested in trying to recreate nature with these tanks. Like I much prefer kind of the Japanese aesthetic, like more of a mix of like completely different types of corals. So SPS with soft coral and an anemone in there. And I think that's much more what reefing used to be like sort of 10, 20 years ago, where you were really trying to recreate a slice of the ocean. Whereas now the idea of success is kind of this fruit stall aesthetic where you, as I say, you got one of everything. It's super colorful, blue lights on all the time. You can't even see the fish because of the blue light. But I mean, at the same time, that is success to people, right? And if that makes them happy, then that's fine. But there's a bit of a disconnect between sort of how modern tanks look and how real reef look and what you can really achieve with fewer coral, but kind of really thinking about the design of the tank, I guess. But
do you know what I like the most? Like when I go and have a look at somebody else's tank is like their passion and their excitement about their tank. It can be a glass box full of rocks and they're really excited about a particular, shrimp goby pair that they've put in there, and they're like, look at that, I see it occasionally, but it's there somewhere, and it's that sort of energy and excitement that I really feed off. And there's loads of that in the hobby, whether you look through people's build threads or listen to podcasts or look through Instagram or whatever it may be, it's hopefully people talking about their tank because they're really passionate and interested in terms of what they're keeping and what they're doing on a day-to-day basis. I think where it crosses over is where it's sort of superficial. People are pulling corals together because they want likes or, on Instagram, or because they want to, be praised for the types of corals that they've bought. But where there's an intrinsic passion or interest, and they're trying to fulfill whatever it is in their mind, success looks like. I find that incredibly inspiring, and I see them as being successful.
I think that's a good point. I'm a perfectionist and I'm never happy. So when I think my most successful tank was probably that 140 litre sort of mixed reef, but I was never happy with it. You look at it and all I see are the problems, like the corals stinging one another, and I'm always tweaking things. And I was thinking, even if you have what other people would deem to be a successful tank, and if you just left it probably would remain successful. And where things go wrong is that you want to tweak things and you get bored because it is just stable. Like a good successful tank in theory shouldn't really need that much work. It's it's just sort of ticking along. But you get bored, you want to try new approaches and new bits of equipment, and probably that boredom is really an enemy to the tank in a way, because you end up tweaking things and upsetting the balance. And as I say, I think that's kind of where I am. Like, so I'm never really happy with the tanks. There's always things I want to do. I'm always moving corals around and trying to figure out how I can get another coral in, or trying a different type of fish. And I think that's okay, right? That's what I get out of the hobby is the tinkering and the experimenting. And I like to go to shops and see what they've got and get excited about adding a new fish and things like that. So, but it definitely, I think, disrupts that idea of a successful tank being something very stable and steady that you kind of don't touch or don't need to touch. I know some people they do it. They've used the first lights that they bought. They use the same equipment. They don't add anything as they go along unless it breaks. But I'm just not that person. I have to get in there and tweak things and play around.
I tend to be Mr. Steady Eddie. So although I'm adding stuff at the moment, once I got my formula, I like to stick with it. That's why I was saying at the beginning, like, to have not water changed and not to have done my water test, like it's making me itch a little bit just thinking about the fact I've not water tested for 2 weeks. Yeah, I think for me it's like once I've got a set system, I like the idea of sticking with it. I'm really risk averse when it comes to fish keeping. Coral are delicate little things, aren't they? Like, especially at the moment I've got lots of things like gonnies and torches, and I've gone for that kind of notoriously fussy coral. So it's that fear of like, what if I just tweak this a little bit and then everything goes. So as an example, I did do a tweak, didn't I, at the beginning of the year. I listened to all this stuff about using a product to feed bacteria to your corals. So I was like, all right, that'll help them grow. Ended up feeding a bad strain of bacteria because I started getting brown jelly and all my gonnies started retracting. And it's only now, that was about 6 months ago, it's only now that all my gonnies that survived that are now out and coloured up again and going again. So that one little choice, that one risk I took has cost me 6 months of happy corals, and that's for me too much risk.
Yeah, I'm a tinkerer in some ways and not in others. So like equipment I don't really tinker with. I've been quite committed to the equipment that I've bought, and I've done a lot of research and really made sure that pieces of equipment for me or for what I thought I wanted to achieve, and once they're on the tank, use them until being used. I'm forever tinkering with the bloody aquascape and corals on the rocks and moving things around to try and make the aesthetic look a little bit different or more attractive to me, I suppose. And that's part of my things that I enjoy. I like messing around with that. Although with this tank, I am trying to keep my hands out less. Not least because I got stung by my long spine urchin this week. First time, right in between the fingers as well, the bugger. Felt like it's like getting stung by a wasp, really.
Oh, so it actually, like, there's some venom or something?
Yeah, definitely. Okay. I was fishing, I think I mentioned last week, I switched my lights off, quite early. And I was fishing around trying to get these nudibranch into the tank with the lights off, and long spine urchin's massive in there. It's about a quarter of the tank and it's pitch black. So I didn't see it. I impaled myself on it. Anyway, so that long spine will keep me out of the tank. That's for sure. I'm going to keep it in there just as a warning to myself. Stop tinkering, get stung by the beast.
My clowns have started to get braver. The male is starting to get quite feisty, and I try to keep my hands out of the tank. But I mean, as your tank grows in, you have to move things around, right? So that anemone I've got in there is taking up more and more space. I keep hoping or wishing it's going to split soon so that it reduces in size. But as it is, it just keeps stinging more and more things. So I think people would say that lagoon tank I have is successful, right? Like, but have to keep on top of it. The dishes are never done, right? It's a case of you have to always tweak things. You have to keep on top of it. You can't just leave the tank. I can understand why you're feeling a bit itchy about not doing your water changes, because as soon as you start to let things coast, I sort of started to do that on my bigger tank, and I lost a little tenuous, and I was like, okay, this is the beginning of something going wrong here, because I'm letting it coast. I'm not keeping on top of like flow as corals are growing in and things like that. So coming back to like the topic of success, I think it's really it as you said, it evolves as you progress through the hobby. I think early on, just keeping coral alive and fish happy and keeping on top of algae and things like that. That's the main goal. And getting through that first year, I think, is probably the biggest barrier to most hobbyists, right?
Definitely. The amount of tanks that you see on online is like, I've been in it a year and now I've moved on. It's quite scary, really, isn't it, for a hobby that can see people in and out that quick. But yeah, I think you're right. If you make it through that first year, your tank gets just that bit more mature, doesn't it? And then things go in, don't always, like you put coral in a new tank, it's always a bit of a risk. It gets less risky. But
things get easier, don't they? It's a bit like cricket. The opening batsmen always have to face the new ball, and it's the most challenging time. But
I don't know anything about cricket. Yeah, straight over my head. Yeah, I used to be a scientist, so I'm very into kind of like quantifiable things. And I was trying to think, how do I actually measure success? And you touched on it then, I think, like, I remember getting to a point where it was like I wasn't scared to buy coral anymore. Like I would just go and buy an aquapora and shove it in the tank, and it was fine. Whereas I remember that first year it was hit and miss, and it's the same with that SPS cube behind me, right? It is touch and go whether if I put a coral in there at the moment, it could go either way, and that is just due to that, I think, instability or whatever it is with young tanks. There is that uncertainty there. But I remember getting to this point where it's like, yeah, I don't care anymore. Like I can put anything in and it generally survives. And I think that for me is like one measure of success. I don't know whether you guys have any ideas. When did you sort of feel like, okay, I'm successful now as a reefer?
Yeah, I'm not sure person myself ever will feel that. Like I'm not very good at reflecting and seeing things, but the way I really get it is if someone like James comes around and we're like chatting, and it's a bit like you were saying earlier, James. You get passionate, don't you? And you're chatting to someone, and sometimes it might be someone who's never kept a reef tank in their life. Comes around, they're just like, "Oh wow, let's talk about your tank." Oh yeah, no, it's successful. It's that kind of. If you ever done DIY, the one thing I can guarantee, if you do a bit of work, everyone will come in, oh, it's great, it's great. You focus on that tiny little brushstroke that you didn't quite get right. But in reality, the bigger picture is hard to see. And I think you need someone sometimes to come in and be like, oh, look at that. It's like when we came to visit your tank, Chris, like every time it's like, oh, wow, it's brilliant. And I could feel yourself being like, oh, but that little bit there.
Yeah, that's what I'm like as a person, though. Like, I'm just perfectionist, right? And I'm never quite happy with how the tanks look, but some of that is because I keep changing things, right? If I just left it, it probably would be fine, right? But I want to like change a coral out and on board of this coral and try something else.
You do your tanks evolve, don't they, Chris? I feel they start off as something, and they sort of, as they grow out and they morph and change and shift, and that's all part of success, isn't it? It's like I always assumed, not because you were a perfectionist, I always thought that was because you'd had success. It was like, I've ticked that box now, I've got some really nice LPS colonies in there. I'm going to start switching these out for some SPS colonies or some softies or what have you. And I think that sort of pursuit of, first of all, that inspiration to make change or to do something different, set up a new tank, change your water changing schedule, whatever it might be, is also part of being successful in the hobby. And then chasing dreams. I think you mentioned in the first episode, Chris, that you're consumed by reefing. It's on your mind all the time. And again, for me, that's like a sign of success as well, because the hobby's got you, and it's making you challenge things and think about things differently. But that's only good if you share that knowledge freely as well. And I think that then also feeds into other people's success, and that makes you even more successful for doing it. It's funny. So, like short and long-term success, your short-term success might be able to be, growing out coral and, not having to firefight all of the time and feeling that you're happy with how a tank looks. But long-term success is so much deeper than that, right? It's about being part of something, changing, trying to challenge things, changing perception, sharing knowledge, listening to others, learning from them, furthering your own knowledge. And that's the great thing about this hobby as well. And, I feel really successful where I, may have had an issue and I've listened to somebody, or somebody said, hey, try this, or I've read something and I've implemented it and it's worked. That makes me feel like, oh, that was a real success. That was brilliant. And there's a hell of a lot of opportunity for that in this hobby, because there's always something to try and improve.
Yeah, I was just thinking then, actually, there is a guy, he lives just down the road. He got in contact, he was starting a marine tank and could do with some sort of advice and guidance. And yeah, it's been really rewarding helping him with issues. And I think there's so much information out there that sometimes you just want one person to to tell you, okay, try this or do that, rather than listening to sort of 10 different opinions. And it's been, as I said, been really, really rewarding, like seeing he's doing it with his daughter. So really nice when they've come over for coral that I'm just throwing away and things like that, and giving them a few fish and stuff. And he sent me a photo of his tank the other day, and it looks amazing. I mean, for less than, I think it's about a year old now, and it looks absolutely incredible. The colors are amazing, the fish are really healthy, it's packed with coral, and he's now starting to try different things. That he's adding a bubble tip anemone, and I was like, okay, that that could go either way. But yeah, it's as you said, as you start to, you have some success, and that encourages you to try new things. And I hadn't really thought about it that way before, but kind of the experimentation in itself is an indication that, okay, you've kind of found your footing and you're ready now to try new things or try experiment.
What do you reckon would be like the top 3 things to ensure beginner success? Like for me, I'm really keen on getting more beginners in the hobby. For me, it's like tank size is probably number 1. Like, don't go too big and don't go too small. 100 litre tank, I reckon, is maybe a bit more is that sweet spot where kind of it's reasonably steady, stable, but you can stock it, because that's the other side of it, isn't it? You've got to stock it. I think if you don't stock a tank quick enough, you start losing these battles to things like algae and all these different bacteria. So like for me, I'm quite a big believer in like biome and diversity and things. So stocking a tank quickly will ensure that the corals are taking up all the goodies in the water rather than algae and things. And then probably like the next thing is like, don't spend too much money. Like just find your feet, because inevitably people will upgrade, whether it's upgrade to a smarter, smaller tank, a bigger tank. And do you know what I mean? Like find your feet is. But yeah, I don't know what you guys like. How would you ensure success for beginners?
I challenge your final piece of success. I might even advise the opposite if I'm being contrary,
oh, really?
and I will be for the sake of for the sake of the podcast. So yeah, money. There are different types of people, and I think that some people, if they make a big investment up front, that would inspire them to keep on going back to it and keeping focused on it. Whereas, if you do things as cheaply as you possibly can, you may not have great equipment. You may have lots of issues, seams busting, and it may be that somebody doesn't necessarily feel that they're that motivated or inspired to go back to it if they've got a setup that costs them 150 quid and they start having issues. They just think, oh, just close it, pack it in. Whereas if they spent 1,500 quid, not only are they maybe less likely to have issues, but they may also think, well, I need to get the most out of this investment. So although this is a really shit period, I'm going to keep on going because I don't want to look like a mug in front of my wife, having spent all of my savings on a fish tank, only to sell it, 4 weeks later. But I don't think it's a one size fits all sort of suggestion to somebody new getting into the hobby. So my advice to that person would be, go easy on yourself, focus on learning, taking on as much knowledge and information as you possibly can, and look to make small incremental improvements. And they would be my 3 pieces of advice.
That's a proper social scientist approach, that, isn't it?
Well, I studied philosophy, so it's
exactly. Yeah, you can see the difference in our different reefing styles. I'd say we're quite contrasted in that respect. Like, you're really reflective, and like you say, the learning, the process. You always talk about the journey. I think that gets you success, doesn't it? Whereas I'm quite prescriptive of use this tick box list to
very practical. Yeah.
What about you, Chris? What do you do?
I would agree with you in that I think the age-old advice was, buy the biggest tank that you can, because it'd be more stable. I completely disagree with that. I've had much more success with smaller tanks, and I just find them much easier to manage. You can do a 90% water change very easily on something like a fluvial Evo, right? And that will fix 99% of a lot of problems, right? Even pests potentially, right? Because you can get rid of things that are in the water column. So yeah, I definitely recommend people starting small and trying out whether you actually like it. I mean, I think one thing that always really surprises me, because I grew up obsessed with animals. One of my earliest memories was waking up on, I think, my birthday, maybe 4 years old or something, and my parents had got me a little aquarium with some goldfish in. So I've never not had fish, and it's always been a huge part of my life, having pets and animals. And it really surprises me, but someone like you, James, just kind of went into a garden center and decided to try it and bring it home, and like not necessarily having had a huge interest in kind of that beforehand, and that's worked out for you. But there's many people, I'm sure, that just see these nice pretty animals, think they'll give it a go, and then actually 6 months in they kind of realize it's not for them, or for whatever reason. It could be loads of reasons why people pack it in. Yeah, so I would agree with you. Don't go all in, don't spend a fortune, don't get the biggest tank that you can possibly fit in. Go for something a bit easier to manage and see if you actually like it first, and get those early successes in, I think, as you say. Something else that I've learned over the last few tanks is that I would probably recommend live rock, and it's difficult to get these days, but I've started 4 or 5 tanks now, and the ones that I use live rock in have been instant tanks. I could put coral in immediately, fish in immediately, very little in the way of ugly algae phases. They've been super easy to run. So particularly again on a small tank, a couple of kilograms of live rock is not hugely expensive, and it doesn't even have to be actual live rock. So I get a lot of my live rock from the Goldfish Bowl in Oxford, and that's just stuff they've got in from tank breakdowns. They've had it there potentially for decades, right? And that alone is good enough, I think, to get the tank growing. And I've tried to do the dry rock with media I've had, in the sump for like 5 years. So in theory, that should have a lot of that beneficial bacteria and stuff on there, but it's not the same. You still, the tank behind me, I've had so many problems with that using dry rock, but I think that would be one of my key tips for success, is to use live rock, and start smaller. I'm trying to think what else. Like don't go crazy with the fish. Like I think a lot of people jump in immediately and want things like powder blue tangs and stuff like that. But focus on those like cool hardy fish. I think a damsel, like some of those damsels, like I've got little yellowtail damsel in the tank behind me, and it just blows my mind how blue it is and yellow it is. And I think it's just such a fantastic fish. It's super peaceful, at least my one is. And I just think sometimes these cheap, easy, hardy fish are overlooked. They add so much life and colour to the tank.
It's easy to get on the bandwagon, isn't it? So my tank's a 5-foot tank, and like pretty much the first thing everyone says to me when they see it is like, "Oh, what tangs have you got in there?" I'm like, "I have one. I have a Tomini, and that's it." Whereas like traditionally, you got a 5-foot tank, or like say have a powder blue, whereas actually I've gone the other way. I've stocked it with like say damsels and small fish. I've got loads of wrasse. So rather than having a few big fish that inevitably going to be aggressive, inevitably going to fight, everything you put in there is going to be beaten up by it. It's like
disease, I think, is the big one, right?
Yeah, exactly. So then you've got all these risks. Again, it's those risks, isn't it, that you've built up from having these few fish. And it's like, do some shopping. I could go out and buy one tank, or I could have, I'd say, like at least 5 small fish, at least for a reasonable sized tank. So that's 5 different outings. That's 5 different opportunities to find new fish. And that's one of the best things. I'd say it's one of the things I'm missing most at the moment, is getting out in the shops. It's a phase in terms of like young family and blah, 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 but missing really going and seeing the shops. And you don't even have to buy, like window shopping in a reef shop is so much fun. It's so good.
I love every time. You never know what's going to be there. So I've not been able to go for a long time because we've been out without a car for a while. We've just got a car again this week, and I'm immediately this weekend going to go to Moss End and see what they have.
I think that one of the biggest opportunities for success is buying equipment that's in line with your objectives and goals. I think I see people having challenges that are so self-inflicted a lot of the time. They, for whatever reason, they buy a 2-foot tank and they want to keep tangs. And it's like, well, buy a 2-foot tank and don't keep tangs, or buy a 6-foot tank and keep tangs. You can't pick and choose and have the best of both worlds. It requires some restraint and some knowledge and some discipline, but make decisions based on what you want your outcomes to be. And I'm not saying that like everybody goes into a fish shop and goes, my outcome is that I've got a 6-foot SPS tank with these. Of course not. We're all sort of impulsive, but I think that's where the sort of discipline and the research comes in, because you make bad decisions, if you haven't thought it through and you haven't researched it, and then in turn you then don't have success. Your fish dies, you get aggression, your coral dies, whatever it may be, and that puts people off and stops them from becoming successful. It's not that they can't be successful; it's just that they've gone the wrong way around about it at the start. And I wonder what role the sort of LFS has to play in that. Has it changed? Is it more people shopping online now and getting tanks delivered to them without that interaction? Is that contributing to people having less success? That actually they're sort of fishing for equipment without any support or any knowledge. Because that support and knowledge for me in the early days was so important for me. Like I would have made some really bad decisions and probably not be still reefing. Was it not for the LFS that supported me, helped me set up, advised me what fish I could keep, what I couldn't, what corals I should put in, when I should start stocking corals. All of those things really helped me on my way. So I think, again, if we're going back, to what would you recommend somebody starting out? Is go and visit a shop, go and physically visit a shop, build a relationship with them.
I was thinking that with WhatsApp groups and things as well, isn't it? Just like chatting to you guys on the WhatsApp group, like in the early days, like I've got a question, I'd ping it out. Remember, like Mike was in our WhatsApp group, and he's like this really experienced guy, like he had like 20 years of marine fish keeping, and you'd put a question on there, and you get all sorts of interesting things. And then Mike would come on and just be like, "This is the answer," and you're like, "Oh yeah, I can see that now." It's just finding that community. So, like say, getting at the fish shop, getting in a group, like finding your local group. There is always a little group in each area. You just got to find it. That's the tricky bit. But yeah, I think you're completely right, James. Learn from people who've done it for years, for sure.
I was going to say, I think I'm the only reef keeper in Didcot where I live. I don't think there's anyone else here, which is why I'm friends with you guys, because you're the closest people. I'm joking. So one thing I was going to touch on there, I mean, it goes back to, I was saying I've been a bit of a mentor for this guy, and I had that as well. When we all know Robin, who lives in Swindon. He was a bit like that for me. I mean, he obviously sells coral and fish, but he was really, really knowledgeable. Another piece of advice I would give along those lines, find one person that you can really talk to and you can see their tank and know, okay, they are a successful reefer themselves. Because as I said earlier, I think, going onto forums, like I love forums. I think they're great. I love these WhatsApp groups, but you can even, in our WhatsApp group, we get dissented opinions on the best ways to approach things, right? So I think sometimes just having that one person, I think particularly early on, where you just need that one person you can go to and say, okay, well, I think I need to start dosing. What should I try? Because if you ask on a forum, you get someone saying, use reef settlements, use all for reef, make your own stuff. Whereas if, I said to this guy, I started with all for reef. I just bought secondhand, single head doser, and that solved my issue for a year and a half sort of thing. And then I started to get more confident and experiment with other methods. But that's like, I really recommend try and find a mentor, either online or in person is even better if you can actually go and see their tank as well. And often they'll give you corals.
Yeah, I don't think I've ever been a mentor, but I think if somebody was to ask me what my biggest success was in the hobby, I think I'd probably say, well, one of the things I'd say is maybe that WhatsApp group, in some respects, I didn't start it. It was started by a couple of guys that don't get involved anymore. But it was sort of kept going, it's been through lots of iterations and groups of people as people's focuses have sort of ebbed and flowed. And I suppose that I've been one of the sort of constants there, trying to keep it going. And, it's brought a lot of people together, solved a lot of problems and probably created quite a few too, but that's fine.
Yeah, we had someone on there this week that was worried about their silicon seams, and I was the panic instigator saying you need to shut it down immediately, whereas everyone else was like, okay, I think it's all right, I think it's just a light. So yeah, actually that's what I wanted to end on actually. I think it'd be really nice to hear what are some successes that we've had, if there's specific things that you can point to where you think okay, that was a really successful experience, or a really successful, I saved this fish, or I saved this coral, or I'm really pleased that I managed to grow this rare coral, or I've kept something alive. I don't know if you've got any specific things you could point to and say, yeah, this is a reefing success that I've had.
One of my first coral purchases was a chap in Gloucester. So drive over there, and he's like, I've got some zoas. How much for them? He's like, oh, you can have them. I've grown them. I've fragged them. It's brilliant. I'm really chuffed. So for you to take them is even better. A couple of years down the line, here I am selling, giving frags away, and it's like that for me is success. I've made a creature in my tank thrive to the point that it's reproduced, that I have to then alter it, I have to change it, I have to remove some of it, and then I can pass it on to someone else. That's success to me. Kept it alive to the point where it has thrived. So it's one thing to keep things alive, it's another thing for them to thrive, isn't it? So yeah, that's my success.
Yeah, I think, I've grown a lot of coral. I've killed a lot of coral. I've probably grown more than I've killed, but it's pretty closely run. I shouldn't laugh. It's sad, but I think my two biggest successes is seeing my youngest daughter at 5 years old want to feed the fish, and meeting new people through the hobby that I now call friends. Hopefully those two things, my daughter's interest in fish keeping and the friends that I've met, will last longer than the coral I'm inevitably going to kill.
Again, you can really see the difference in reefing approaches. One of mine was, for a long time I'd wanted to try a mandarin, got a spotted mandarin, and it was eating and stuff in the shop. They were feeding it frozen food and things. But I think when I got it home and put it into this relatively well-established tank, it immediately switched back to its natural diet of pods and things that it found around the tank. And it just forgot, I think, how to eat prepared food again. And it was getting skinnier and skinnier. And I got to the point where even I offered it for free, on Ultimate Reef. I said, if someone's got a big tank that's well established and wants to take it, please do. And actually, surprisingly, didn't have any offers. But I mean, it was very skinny by that point. But it really kind of forced me. I was like, okay, I need to do something here. And I did some research and eventually kind of decided, okay, I'm going to catch it, put it into a little guppy sort of breeder box. Basically, I just spent like a month trying every food that I could get my hand on. And eventually it just, again, I feel like this has been very NIOS heavy this episode. They're not a sponsor, but for some reason it started to eat NIOS goji berries, which are, it has these, they're called NIOS goji berry pellets, not actual fruit, but it has the fruit in there. For some reason, that's what it started to eat. And then since then, since I got it onto that, it then started eating all sorts of pellet food, and now I just chuck in pellets, and it's really nice and fat and healthy. And I've had it, this is probably now a year and a half, maybe 2 years on since I got it, and it's absolutely fine. And so that's like a real something I could point to and say, I almost lost this fish, but I was able to do some research and persevere and try different approaches, and it's turned around. And as I said, it's really happy and healthy and one of my favorite fish now. Great. Well, I think that was a really good discussion. I think we've covered lots of different topics there. So we'll end the episode there. I just want to encourage listeners to, subscribe to our social media, Instagram, Facebook. We're still doing the giveaway, as I said. So we've got a 50 quid Prestige Reef gift card to give away. So you can buy 50 quid's worth of coral. And all we're asking you to do is to go to the episode 1 Instagram post or Facebook post, and just comment in the comments, something that you liked about the episode or suggestions for future episodes. And once there's enough people who have actually put comments there, we'll do we'll pick a name at random and do that giveaway. I don't think we have a plan for episode 3, so maybe if those suggestions start coming in, we'll pick one of those. But any final thoughts before we wrap up?
I think if you're a new person, give it a go, because it's a fun hobby. When you get into it and you have success, it's wicked, isn't it? So much fun.
Yeah, so my final words would be, go easy on yourself, enjoy the challenge.
Great. Well, we'll leave it there. Thanks so much, guys, and we'll see you on the next episode.
You've been listening to Reefing Radio. Subscribe, share, and stay salty. Reefing Radio, over and out.